Hello, everyone. Welcome and happy Pride. I'm Dana James Edwards. I'm the head of Fairness, Inclusion and Respect here at Action Sustainability and the Supply Chain Sustainability School. And I'm joined on this webinar today by Christina Riley and Joanne Lockwood. And I want to tell you a little bit about them before we get started, although you will learn more about them, of course, as the webinar proceeds. So I stalked Christina's LinkedIn right before this webinar, and I saw that she's been working in the construction industry since 1993. That's what it says on LinkedIn, 1993. That's a very long time, Christina.
And I don't know how old do I?
And you're still doing it.
Yeah.
And on top of her day job as a construction manager, she's a tireless advocate for equity and was instrumental in the founding of Building Equality, LGBT Construct, and Constructability, which you may have heard of. These are organizations in our industry which promote inclusion and parity, and also could take you to Pride if you were so inclined under the Building Equality banner. And I have to mention that she is one of our most amazing FIR ambassadors. She held gold FIR ambassador status for many, many years, and we are excited to have her with us. And Joanne is the founder and CEO of See Change Happen, SEE. It's a diversity, inclusion, and belonging practice with a specialism in providing transgender awareness and support to organizations and businesses. So remember, I said it was See Change Happen, SEE. The SEE stands for something. It stands for Smile, Engage, and Educate. That's how you get C. And that's how Joanne approaches her work. She passionately believes that people are people and that no matter who they are, they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Hear, hear. That's what the FIR program is all about. Joanne is extremely active on social media around trans rights. And I remember when the recent Supreme Court ruling was hitting the headlines, I went there and found her page and her posts an oasis, really, in what was a really heightened and frightening time. So I would encourage you to follow them both on social media. Just a flag that today's webinar is going to be a little bit different from some of the webinars we normally host in the FIR program. There are not going to be any slides today. This is just an intimate conversation between Christina, Joanne, and I that we are pleased to be able to share with you. We are very grateful today that Joanne and Christina have agreed to answer questions from the audience. I should not have to say this, but I will anyway. Please keep those questions respectful. Once questions are asked in good faith, Christina and Joanne are happy to answer them. Now, for questions today, we're going to be using a tool called Padlet. Padlet is a newer tool. It's very easy to use, and I want to quickly illustrate that by showing you how easy it is. This is what Padlet looks like up on my screen here. You will see that there's already a question. Here's one I prepared earlier, very Blue Peter of me. If you want to add a question, all you have to do is click on this little plus sign in the corner. The plus sign will turn into a pencil and a little window will come up where you can type your question in and click submit. Once you click submit, it goes here into the main space, and you'll notice this little heart icon here. You can upvote a question. So if someone puts a question and you look at it and you think, yes, I really want to answer to that question, go ahead and click that love button. It helps us ascertain the order in which we will be asking the questions of the panel. See, I told you it was really easy. Click the link that's in the chat, press the plus sign, and you'll be able to submit your questions as easy as pie. Right, now I have a couple questions to get us started, and then I'll have one eye on the Padlet and one eye on the screen. And as your questions flow through, we will filter those into the conversation as well. So our very first question of today for both panelists, and I'll come to Joanne first and then Christina. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and how your identity has evolved over time? Over to you first, Joanne.
Wow, that's a massive origin question, isn't it? Sort of how has my identity evolved over time? So anyway, thank you for the warm introduction. And you're right, it's been a journey. It's been an evolution of self So I wind back the clock to my leaving school. Let's go back that far. Joined the Royal Air Force as an electronics engineer. Left the Royal Air Force, didn't work out. Became an IT tech in banks. So I worked for Coots Bank. I worked for Royal Sun Alliance, people like that, Friends Provident, and spent a good 5-10 years in the IT industry in out there. End of 90s, I started my own IT company and ran that quite successfully over the course of 20 odd years. So I got to about, I don't know, like mid 40s, and that old midlife crisis thing kicked in. And all of this stuff that's been going on in my head for most of my life, my gender identity, the confusion, the incongruence with who I was, just manifesting itself in a more tangible way. And I think just more awareness, more availability of knowledge, internet, Facebook, meeting people, friends. Suddenly I realized that I wasn't just this weird person in my own head. Other people shared similar experiences, and what I was manifesting in my head was real and credible. And that belief opened up. So mid-40s, children left home, empty nest, allowed me to have that conversation with myself and my wife. And also, I found that IT had become that kind of tired old thing that I was getting really frustrated with. So, mix all that together in my late 40s, I had this big sort of kind of change program going on in my head. And I got out of IT. I sold my business to my business partners, and I suppose traded in my gender. And from March 2017, I was 52 years old. I put everything on red, spun the wheel to see what happened. And here I am today. And I founded See Change Happen back then to promote, as you said, trans inclusion in the workplace and to organizations, but also inclusion, belonging around equity, hiring, employee experience, employee engagement across sectors. And I'm now a quite well reputed keynote speaker across the world on stages, and also podcast host and consultant into business. So that's kind of a bit of a potted history about where I came from.
It was great. And when you decided to put everything on red, were you scared? Were you worried about ramifications, or did you just think, look, now's the time, I'm doing it? Go for it.
I have this kind of way of rationalizing my decision-making process. And I became personally aware of this rationalization when I had my laser hair removal on my face to get rid of my beard. I had a question in my head. Would I regret doing it more or regret doing it not, sort of thing? So where would I regret more? I decided that I would regret not having laser hair removal if my hair turned grey and I could no longer have it removed via laser. So I make decisions based on what would I regret more, doing it or not doing it. And then I evaluate those decisions. So I got to the point, in my gender identity, selling my business, all of this, would I regret not doing something? And I came to the conclusion that yes, I would. So that in my head, it became necessary to action what I was thinking. So that's, there's loads of fear, loads of fear, loads of fear, loads of interpretation, loads of unknown.
I think that's a good way to live, though, and I might start asking myself that question as I go about doing things. Just generally, what am I going to regret more, doing it or not doing it? That's a great way of seeing the world.
It gets you in trouble, though. There's not many mistakes. It does get you in trouble. I've done some crazy stuff over the years, and yeah, I don't. I recommend having a filter in there as well, or at least someone to check it. Gender transitioning, that's caused me a lot of trouble as well. Sorry.
Thank you for sharing that. I will definitely consider putting a checks and balances in as I go about doing this. Christina, do you want to share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, as Joanne says, this is like it's like the biggest question because what you're asking me is to like surmise like 54 years in 5 minutes. And it's been a massive journey because obviously, vastly, we've gone through cultural change around inclusion,
Mhm.
and as well as in the workplace, but across all parts of society, including, education at school and, throughout your whole life, through university and getting a job and to being,
Mhm.
in the industry 30 years. So, I mean, for my journey, began. I know. Remember when I probably under 10. I remember questioning gender. What was gender? Why? I always talk about this book in the 70s. I don't. Joanne will remember that there's a book called The Joy of Sex, and when you're younger, you sort of looked at it, and it was like, oh, this is what a man looks like. This is what a woman looks like. And I just remember sort of questioning sort of biology and gender. And then as I went into my sort of teens, I remember sort of finding clothes back in the day, back in the 1980s. They had things called jumble sales. And I remember just sort of, I don't know how, but I sort of kept some clothes from some jumble sales and hid it under the bed or hid it in the back of my cupboard or something. And I just sort of tried stuff on in private. But obviously back then, the word transgender didn't really, I don't think it really existed. It wasn't in the mainstream. The term was more transsexual that was in the mainstream sort of discussion points. But again, I didn't really do anything. I was just a boy that dressed really, hardly at all. But as I got into my 20s, I'd obviously got a job. I started work in the construction industry when I was about 22, I think, of graduating from university. And in my late 20s, I started cross-dressing um, in privacy. So sometimes that would be at home. And you started, as you became more aware of my cross-dressing, you then started to reach out for places you could go to dress. So I used to go to a club in Milton Keynes, Pink Panthers, quite a well-known nightclub, which is still going today. It's a great place. But it was like an outlet for me to go and dress and be this different person in a different gender. And over time, I used to ended up doing more and more sort of through my 20s into my 30s. And two parts to it really is that when I went out as this person, I started to have more friends in that only knew me in my female
Mhm.
presentation. But then it was all quite a secret. I was married. I got two daughters. And I'll be honest, I was terrified. I was absolutely scared, stiff. I became quite ill with the secrecy.
Mm.
I ended up having panic attacks for about 10 years. I ended up being on beta blockers. I was really quite unwell.
Mhm.
And as I went into my 30s, my panic attacks got more and more severe to being it was almost like all the time. It was like having one going to work, having one in the evening, having a panic attack when you're sleeping, waking up in the middle of the night, having a panic attack. And literally, my heart would be racing. I was just talking to somebody just now about this actually, but literally, I would be shaking for hours and hours, where your body goes into a shock response. And it's just a perpetual cycle. And it is, I'm sure a lot of it was just because I was, hiding who I really was. And I just became really, really unwell to a point that for me, the choice in terms of transitioning was do I feel like I'm just going to die of stress? Literally, I did feel like I was dying from these panic attacks, or to just confront my demons and go to my doctor. And I came out to my doctor, and after years of medication, I said, I think my panic attacks are because I'm transgender. And he sent me on for some counselling with a psychologist. Is that right? Psychologist. I never get that right. But I had sort of 10 meetings with this lady, and I cried, and it was just such a, it lifted it off my shoulders about how I felt inside. But then, while that did cure the panic attacks, but then I was still not out at work, and I wasn't out at work until 2014 when I was at Balfour Beatty and we launched their LGBT network. And by launching their LGBT network, it then empowered me to basically come out at work, which I thought would never happen. I thought that secret would be with me forever. But actually, it was the Balfour Beatty network, LGBT network, that was a catalyst for me actually changing my gender, changing my name, and being who I am today. So really, I've got a lot of thanks for the construction industry, because without it, I wouldn't be me. So that's sort of like a really short version of 54 years.
That's great, Christina. But also, like, people often wonder, are employee networks worth it? Like, why do we still have them? Do they matter? Do they make a difference? So I loved hearing that it was such a crucial part of your journey in being able to help you embrace your identity. Now, I had a list of questions, but some really good ones have come in. So I'm gonna ask one of them. The most popular voted one is, what has your proudest moment as a trans woman been? Or when did you really feel I'm a woman now? Is the currently most upvoted question. Christina?
Okay. For me,
I'll go to you first.
I don't know, proudest moments. I'll be honest, I've had so many incredible moments. As a trans activist in the workplace, I've been into so many companies. I've been into Disney. I've been into the National Grid. I've been over to America four times. I won the British LGBT Awards. I think proudest moment is actually, even those are like incredible things. The proudest moment is when like your family accepts you, and like when your mum and dad turn up at the hospital and you've had your gender surgery, and mum walks in and gives you a hug, and you feel accepted. Or but probably even above that is my children, and this is all about families as well. And even today, my children are now adults. They're like 27 and 25. And my relationship isn't the best, but we do have a good relationship. But I don't see them as much. I do feel they've been affected by my transition. But just having their acceptance is like probably the proudest thing for me, and that like reaches into the heart. And it's all those fears with your all that anxiety with panic attacks. That fear is about, is your family going to accept you? Are you going to have a life? Are you going to have a career? Are your family, are your parents going to see you, speak to you? All those things. So I think that's what I'm proud of. I managed to navigate all of this and
Amazing.
keep my family.
That's great. Thank you, Christina. And Joanne?
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. It's not necessarily proud for myself, it's proud for others. And I think my mum, she's a staunch ally, and she's unashamedly a Daily Mail reader and a GB News watcher. Yet she said to me the other day that I've challenged her in ways that she'd never been challenged before to think differently. And so it just shows that you can, by smiling, engaging, and educating, as my mantra, you can work with people. So my mum, she calls me her daughter. She's proud of me as her daughter. And I'm going to give you a quick couple of little titty stories here. Where the first one, my father passed away in January. Don't worry, all good. It's not all good. He passed away, but yeah, we're kind of over it as a family. And my mum asked me to deliver the eulogy at his funeral. And the day before, I happened to mention to my mum, I said, who's coming? Who do you know? And she said, oh, so-and-so in the street, so-and-so from the street. So a lot of old neighbours. And I said, oh, I remember playing football in the road with Alan. How is he? Oh, he's fine. Yeah, he's going to come on. I said, have you told the neighbours about me? Or, given any hints? She went, no, 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 no. You're my daughter. I'm proud of you. It doesn't matter. No. So I was conscious. I was introduced at the eulogy by the celebrant, saying Brian's daughter Joanne is going to read the eulogy, and I knew that half the people knew that Brian didn't have a daughter at the time. So I stood up there, and I remember scanning the room, and I saw Alan, I saw some other people that I thought they've no idea. But anyway, at this point, they're probably scratching their heads, and I just started talking, and you could almost see the penny drop, and they go, okay. So I finished the eulogy. I went up to people afterwards and said, hi, you've changed a bit. And they went, oh, yeah, so have you. Had a good old chat. And then wind the clock forward, look, a couple of months later, last month, my mum and I, we went and did an anthology trip to Scotland to go and see her relatives, go and see the family gravestone and go and visit some cousins she hadn't seen in 30, 40 years. And she said, oh, we're going to see Mary, my cousin Mary and her husband Eric. So I hired a car, we drove up there. Mum knocks on the door, Mary opens the door. Oh, Pat, oh, Mary, this is my daughter Joanne. I walk, we sit down there having tea, coffee. Husband Eric is giving me the funny looks. You can tell the cogs are kind of whirring in the back of his head. And you think, and then before long, we're chatting away, eating dinner, at the end of a hugging, going, oh, let's do this again sometime. Yeah, bye. Next day, we saw David. Very similar thing. Knock on the door, open the door. Mum said, here's my daughter Joanne. Go sit there. David's giving it. Halfway through lunch, he's saying, Joanne, what was your maiden name? I said, that explains it. I was at your wedding, wasn't I? I went, you probably were. He said, oh, yes, I was with Mary, who we'd seen yesterday. I go, okay, that's all clear now. I get it. And then as I'm driving home with my mum in the car, back to the Airbnb, I said to Mum, did you signpost? Did you tell him, Eric and Mary about me? No, why should I? You're my daughter. I'm proud of you. And I went, Mum, you've obeyed the golden rule. Do not out someone without their permission. But there's a platinum rule that trumps it. If you haven't outed them, tell them you haven't outed them so they can be ready for the conversation. But anyway, that was actually, those two stories were a proud moment that with my family and random people that I hadn't met for 40 years. So we can't keep holding in our heads that everyone's going to be against us. It's often how we show up as individuals is reflected back to us. And as I say, my mum, absolutely my best ally, and she's a fierce and staunch supporter. So yeah, I'm proud of her.
That is amazing. Christina, one for you. The next most upvoted is, have you been pleasantly surprised by colleagues' reaction and warmth? Working in construction, I'm wary of people's unprogressive opinions and often assume the worst. I wonder if there's any hope with gradually changing views and acceptance in the industry. And then it says, thank you so much for sharing and happy Pride, which is really cute. So I'm reading all of it.
So it's literally it's 11 years now that I've transitioned. So I mean, I never thought I'd be here like 11 years later, and like it seems like a distant memory when I first transitioned. But like surprisingly, it might surprise a lot of people, but actually, my trans status or whatever on a day-to-day basis at work doesn't come into play probably almost never. It's like something that I just do my job. So it's probably more of a we'll talk about subtleties in a bit, but I suppose for me when I first transitioned 10 years ago, I basically agreed with the managing director at Balfour Beatty as when I was Chris in my male form. We sort of planned like a 6-month period to work out how we're going to tell everybody, because it'd never really been done before. And when it came to it in September, it coincided with the Macmillan Cake Day in September for cancer awareness. Not that there's obviously a connection, but on that day, the office in Heathrow had like literally hundreds and hundreds of cakes. It was a big, not a celebration, but obviously a great gathering of everybody in the office. We had about 200 people in the office. And John, who was my managing director, he took basically he called like an exceptional meeting and called everybody in. Everybody thought we were going to get the sack or something. But actually, I didn't attend that particular part of a meeting. But John told like everybody that Chris is going to go away, but he is going to come back as Christina, and in a couple of weeks' time, they were very gracious and gave me like a week off to like prepare and sort out my wardrobe. So then when I came back 2 weeks later, it was all changed. Obviously I was quite terrified walking through the door for the first time as Christina. But what surprised me is like suddenly, all of a sudden, I was made really welcome by all the women at Balfour Beatty. I was like suddenly part of their community,
Oh,
and it was like obviously it's quite a bit of a culture shock for me because we live like gender roles every day, and of course there are like women have groups and the men have groups, and we all interact in different
yeah.
ways. But it's just really lovely to felt suddenly part of like the women within the Balfour Beatty. But then equally, a lot of the men came up to me and hugged me and said, congratulations. And it was like amazing. And and then the project managers on my sites invited me and we went out for dinner with like the site team. And I was just made to feel really like actually it was just fine, but a lot to celebrate. But at the time I was incredibly nervous and worried about my presentation and what I looked like and my makeup and my clothes and all of that sort of stuff. But 10 years on, literally, I don't even see that there's a reaction. It's like I'm just a person. So like any other person, everybody, we interact every single day with different people.
Mhm.
We like question every person we meet, whether they're trans or not trans. And
We
and
don't.
my lived experience, like coming to the British Museum, I have to meet the security team, I have to get in, I meet the subcontractors, I meet the design team. Nobody like stares at me or questions me, are you trans, or nobody. So, and that's like that's inclusion, isn't it? When
Yes.
you feel included, you feel you're just doing your job and respected for your job. That's how inclusion feels.
It's great. Thank you so much, Christina. Now, there are two on the same amount of votes, so I'll go for those two next. Um, do you have any advice for trans women aiming to come out? Christina, yours will be within the current construction industry, and Joanne, yours would be just generally, given the Supreme Court ruling and political climate. But then there's a little comment that says, "Thank you for this webinar. I'm coming out at work soon," which is just thank you for sharing that. And so I have to ask the question, do you have any advice, especially in the current landscape? And I'll come to you, Joanne, first, and then we'll go to Christina for anything more specific to the industry.
Not strictly advice, because everyone is unique. Everyone has their own journey, and I wouldn't want to imprint my view on somebody else. But the sort of approach I would take is, first of all, is it necessary for you? Does it make sense for you? Is it important enough for you to come out? And the reason I put that sort of caveat at the beginning is because it wasn't necessary for me for many, many, many years, 40 odd years of my life. It wasn't necessary. At the point it became necessary, it became an overwhelming imperative to do something about it. So judge where you are. Don't be scared of the unknown. And that's easy for me to say. It's easy for me to say when you cross that Rubicon.
Yeah.
It's easy to say looking back, but it's not a 1,000-foot drop. It's a 1-inch step. You don't fall as far as you are. You're going to trade in a lot of your privilege, a lot of everything you've ever known, and you almost, I mentioned you have to put everything on the roulette wheel and spin it. You do, and that's the reality. Yeah, I didn't want to have a narrative that I was going to lose everything. I had to work hard to keep and retain everything. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to say to yourself, what is more important? Is it transitioning? Is it being my authentic self? Is it crossing over to this new version of me, or the version of me that you've never seen before? If that is more important than everything else in your life, that is the first step, because you have to be prepared to risk everything. And I don't want to sound dramatic here, but
Mm-hmm.
everything you save and bring with you, I saw as a bonus. And that this isn't right. You shouldn't have to make this life-changing major decision. That's one of the challenges of being trans in the current world. Is there's such a negative back pressure against everything surrounding trans people at the moment, is that you do have to trade this in. You're going to trade in your reputation, your network, your history, your family, potential, all these things. So the advice is, it's not a bigger step as you think it is, but there are things you've got to consider. And I would say, if you considered all of that, and again, back to my equation, would you regret more doing it than not doing it,
Mm-hmm.
etc., etc.? And you come to that decision. Trust in some friends. Build a community. Find people
Yes.
out there that can support you.
Yes.
Don't read the press. Turn social media off. Don't go onto Twitter. Don't read the comments. People
Mm-hmm.
are going to love you, but people are
Mm-hmm.
also not going to like you. You can't read the likes without reading the not likes. So somehow
Mm-hmm.
you've got to try and balance things out. Get out to the real world. Go and live your life. Don't hide in trans only communities. You're a woman. You're a man. Go out and hang around with men. Go out and hang around with women. Trans
Mm-hmm.
people are great. We're fantastic, but we all end up talking ourselves down sometimes, or amplifying some of the hate that's out there. So get
Okay.
out there and go to Witherspoons, and not Pinks. Pinks is great. I've had great nights in Pinks, but go out and Witherspoons. Go and hang out in the local cafe. Go and do stuff in the real world, because that's who you are. You don't get
Okay.
fulfillment from transitioning by living at home, by living in small communities. Get out
Mm-hmm.
there and be yourself. Get out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did.
Joanne, thank you so much. Christina, anything to add? By the way, this is such a good conversation and people agree. So in the question panel, a little thing has just popped up saying, this is not a question, but I'm sat here in my office crying because I am so happy for you both that you feel so accepted. So people are being, oh, John has a real life heart. Yeah, I think the same feels that I'm feeling are also being felt by the people who are listening. And for the person who asked if there's going to be a recording shared, there will be. We are recording. Okay, Christina, over to you for
Yeah,
anything you want to
yeah.
add.
I'm just obviously picking up what Joanne said. Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago or 11 years ago, well, I've been dressing for like 20 years. So back then, there was like society wasn't really where it is today. And so for me, the only place I could go, or I felt I could go, was like a place like Pink Punters. But here we are today. I now come into London, I get on a train. I always like to think like the most intimate thing is like being on a London tube train as a trans person, and you're stood up on in Baker Street station, and you get on the tube, and it's all crowded, and you're literally in each other's armpits, and like that's the most intimate thing, as a trans person, because people are literally looking in your face. And I used to be actually literally petrified of just considering, how do I get on a train? How do I when I first came out at home, I was petrified of literally opening my front door. And I would open my front door about an inch and see if my neighbours could see, because obviously they knew me as Chris, and but I was then living full time, so I was terrified of having to tell all sorts of people. But as I say today, um, I don't even think about it. I don't. It just doesn't register. I don't
Mhm.
care what people think if they see me today.
Mhm.
But in terms of advice, um, as Joanne says, everybody has their own journey. So you really have to find your own way. But within construction industry, there are quite a few networks. So you have obviously got building equality, you've got inter engineering, you've got planning outs, you've got freehold. Building equality has chapter networks all over the country, from Glasgow to Cardiff to Leeds to Manchester to London, and Birmingham. So there's, for me, if I was, you sort of want to be looking for your own social circle, your own support structure. And a beginning might be to reach out to one of these networks and find people that can support you and advise you and be a sounding board about what you're planning to do. But equally, I'd say, my 10 years of being out in construction has been, all my fears have been squashed, really, because over the 10 years, I've probably only had like 2 or 3 like direct abuse situations, people not calling me my correct name or using the wrong pronouns. That's only been 2 or 3 times in 10 years. More of the if we talk about discrimination, is more subtle, really, about are you considered for promotion? Are you
Right.
against a male colleague?
Yeah.
You start to fall into the discrimination or the prejudice that women face. So that's sort of the things I sort of face now. But I would say, you want, for any of us, you want to live your authentic self, and you want to be happy, and just follow your dreams, and look for people that can help you.
It's great advice. Thank you both so much. Now to the nitty-gritty. What steps can employers take right now to make trans workers feel safe and included, especially in the current context that we're in and all the discussions with trans rights in the media? So, Joanne, I'll come to you first on that one.
It's tough out there. It's tough out there. Every trans person I speak to, masculine, feminine, non-binary people, are hurting. We're hurting deeply. We've had our citizenship revoked. We've had what was believed to be our rights told suddenly that those rights never existed and have been completely erased. We see our politicians, we see people who we trust actively supporting the removal of our rights and subjugating us under different rules. That's how people are feeling. So as an employer, I would encourage you to understand that feeling. That's the first thing. You have to have empathy for where we are right now, how we're hurting, how we're burning. Once you have that feeling inside of you and you're listening to the messages and the hurt we have, then you can start thinking about how you can take action. And I would say it's not about knee-jerking. It's not about reading the headlines. It's not around listening to what's going on, because people are misrepresenting the Supreme Court ruling and trying to create this clarity that trans people are no longer permitted to use toilets, change rooms, whatever it may be. There's still the current EHRC guidelines that were statutory guidance was published in 2011. That is still the statutory guideline. There's a clarification that sex means biological sex in the Equality Act. The Equality Act is not the workplace regulations of 1992, which a lot of employers are using in order to talk about toilets and changing rooms and other things, which is workplace regulation. So we are in this period of murkiness where clarity doesn't really exist. Both sides, both opinions have lawyers, both opinions have legal teams trying to challenge court rulings, guidance, and both people are trying to push their side. So I would say, as an employer, what you should do right now, listen to your people, understand their pain. And when I say listen to your people, I mean all people. So we have to listen to people who are not trans as well. We have to understand what their anxieties, why they may have confusion over trans rights, or maybe they have different views about trans rights. Understand what they're thinking. Audit your policies, audit your practices, audit your guidelines, and understand what needs to be looked at and changed when it needs to be changed. But right now, I'd say hold the rope. Don't panic. Don't make knee-jerk reactions. Deal with things pragmatically. Take good, sound legal advice. Don't default to safety, because safety in excluding trans people is not safety. What you're doing there is you're opening up to other discrimination claims as well. So I would say at the moment, just hold on in there, talk to your people, do consultations, and prepare for the statutory guidance to be reviewed and potentially pass into law in the November timeframe. But right now, workplace regulations 1992. I, as a GRC holding trans person with my birth certificate that says girl on it, am covered as a woman in workplace regulations. That hasn't changed. So legally, I'm still a woman. except for the Equality Act. So again, that is the confusion. That is the murkiness. Don't make these knee-jerk reactions without doing proper risk assessments, equality impact assessments, privacy assessments, and everything else. So, but please listen to the hurt, listen to the pain, listen to how people are feeling.
Thank you, Joanne. Anything to add from you, Christina?
I just wonder, well, obviously Joanne's given some really fantastic advice there, and probably Joanne's a bit more of an expert than I am on obviously some of the legislation as well. For me, I just really wanted to say in terms of how trans people are being hurt. So for the last sort of 9.5 years, I've enjoyed my trans status. I've enjoyed living just my authentic self. I don't even want to use the label as trans, really. I'm just Christina and living a female presentation and life. For me, like I say, I get up every day. I don't even really think about it. I just live, basically, which is where we all just want to be. But then as soon as the Supreme Court ruling happened on the Equality Act and the definition of a woman, all the, it's just totally, as a trans person, suddenly you don't feel safe anymore. Suddenly you feel the haters are empowered. You feel the government is against you. Institutions are against you. You see employers that are misunderstanding the ruling, as Joanne says, and then you feel threatened at work. You feel unsure about which toilet do you use. For me, there's other impacts. It's like when I go to, when I come into London, for the first time in 9 years in my transition, I've had to stop and think, well, do I actually go and use the female toilet? Or do I go at the train station? Or do I go in the male toilet? Or do I go and find the disabled toilet? Or even is there a disabled toilet? And should I use a disabled toilet? And it all goes round in your head. And the same in an airport. I've just been to America and I've had exactly the same feelings. And when you're passing through security and you're passing through, over in America, it's quite bad as well. But then it goes round in your head and it's like, well, I just want to use the toilet. So I'm not going to go and use a male toilet. So I will continue to use a female toilet. But then it's the anxiety of like, if you're in that space, are you going to be challenged? Are you going to be threatened? There are people that feel empowered to be violent and to be abusive. And it's scary, So, this is where we are today for trans people, is that we're scared. And I was never scared like 6 months ago, like I am today. But I just live my life. But I still think about every event I go to, am I going to be asked about this, So yeah, that's the impact on trans people, and I think Joanne's advice was spot on as well.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think it's really important for us to be able to hear ourselves and understand the hurt, even though we could never live it, but being able to hear about it from someone is really important. Joanne, there is a question linked to that one, even though it's not currently the highest upvoted, I'm still going to ask it because it's on topic. What if a private company doesn't agree with the Supreme Court ruling? The actual wording is, what if their internal culture doesn't fit with the ruling? Do they have any autonomy to have their own inclusive approach?
The easiest way of looking at this is, if you want to exclude trans people, trans women or trans men from a space, you can, if you want to. The Equality Act no longer protects me to claim sex discrimination from a space. If you want to exclude, you can. Not must, can. If you want to include trans people, you can. You can create policies and processes in your own business. You're providing access to the public as well, again, through proper risk assessment, through proper design, floor to ceiling toilet cubicles, they don't need to be gendered. They don't need to be gendered. And you hear all these sub stories about people saying, well, hang on a minute, if you allow a trans woman in there, you've made it mixed sex. That's really trying to create shock and awe tactics here. We're saying, well, if you allow a trans woman in, you have to allow all men in. That's not the case, because we still are protected by the Gender Reassignment Protected Characteristic in the Equality Act. A man can't claim he is protected by gender reassignment. So therefore, allowing trans women to share a female space with dignity, with respect, because nobody wants to feel they're in a space where they're being subjected to potential violence or anything else that may occur. So floor to ceiling cubicles, they're gender neutral. Put a sink in the cubicle. If you've got changing rooms where people are getting naked or partially undressed, ensure there are sufficient locked rooms within that space. You do not need to exclude people if you've got adequate protection. And everything I'm talking about is good practice. It's good practice anyway. Yeah, I know many women who have the wobbly bits they don't want to show off to their friends. And they don't march around swimming pool changing rooms flaunting their bits everywhere. They go into a cubicle, they lock the door, they get changed, they go into a shower, they come back. So those spaces already exist. And that's what we're talking about here, is not creating a barrier. We're not creating a third space. We're just making sure the spaces we have are open and respectful for all. So yes, undoubtedly, you as an employer can create spaces that are respectful and inclusive of trans people. That is still the case. There's no must, there's can and could, not should. So you could choose to include trans people if you wish. And there are steps and guidance out there to help you do that.
It's brilliant, Joanne. Thank you so much. Christina, earlier you said, I'm not a trans woman, I'm Christina. I showed up as myself, yeah, words to that effect. And a question has come in, which is being a trans woman your identity preference of choice as it acknowledges your journey? Or would you like to see a transition to an identity where you are simply referred to as a woman? And it goes on to say, I wonder if this categorization between trans and cis can cause more problems and is just another means of dividing people. So the question is, do you want to be referred to as a trans woman because it acknowledges your journey, or would you like to move to an identity where you are simply referred to as a woman?
Gosh, that's a big question.
It's a big question.
First, say every trans person, trans man, trans woman, non-binary person, will have their own identity and will have their own way of describing their presentation. And, whatever my view is about me, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same about, say, Joanne or anybody else. It's just how I feel. So I actually think being transgender is actually just somebody that goes through a process of transitioning. So I've transitioned, I've gone through social transition, and I've gone through surgery. So I've, physically, I've gone through that physical transition. So I've just gone through that. In terms of how I identify, I just identify as Christina, and for me, my presentation is female. But I recognize my history, that I lived for 40 years as a male. That's part of my identity. And I still am proud of who I was before I was Christina. I'm still proud of everything I achieved and with my family and having my children. And, so my identity is a complex identity because it sort of covers, I talk about Chris and I talk about Christina, but we're the same person, but they're two chapters of my life. So, yes, I live as a trans woman, but, it's a complex, my identity is a complex identity. So, yeah, but not every trans woman would agree, would say that's their way of expressing their identity. So it's just important to be aware of that. And
take it on an individual level.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of identity, say, related to using a toilet, obviously I'm going to use a female toilet, so I identify as a woman. With that respect, you would never get me walking into a male toilet, and wouldn't do haven't ever done in 10 years. So yeah, does that sort of answer the question? It's slightly complex because I am proud of who I was before. I sort of miss who I was before as well. but then I love who I am today. So it's, these are the wrestles, but of identity. But I suppose where I am today, when I look at, like, I talk about my panic attacks and the history of my mental health with dealing with who I was, where I am today is in a really good place. And
Uh-huh.
I'm in the best place I've ever been mentally in terms of my
Right.
identity. And like, I just want people to know me as Christina, and you can interpret that in whatever way you want to interpret it. But this is who I am. This is what you get at work, out on site, or if you meet me socially. This is who I am. So yeah, do
Hey,
we need to?
Christina.
Do we need to really? I suppose another question is, and obviously I appreciate the question in the chat, but actually, should we ask these? Do we need to ask these questions about what your
Mm,
identity is? It's like when I meet you, you say, Dana, it's like I'm not questioning your identity. I'm just taking you on face value who you are and enjoying your company, enjoying the chat. Or Joanne, the same. So like, yeah, it's sort of intrusive, but obviously I appreciate in this forum we're questioning the question.
thank you, Christina.
Does that make
Joanne,
sense?
anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, in my professional life, my bio, I am a professional trans person. So that's part of my brand, a DEI consultant, a trans awareness specialist, whatever you want to call me. It's part of my and my credibility in what I do.
Uh-huh.
I take my professional hat off, go to the cinema, go shopping, live my life, go see my friends. And the majority of my friends today have only ever known me as Joanne.
Uh-huh.
My professional network has only ever known me as Joanne. So
Uh-huh.
in amongst a handful of people I still know from the past, yes, maybe I'm Joanne, the trans woman.
Uh-huh.
It's like a friend of mine is Nick, the gay guy, because he came out while he knew us, sort of thing. But for everybody else, I'm just Joanne, and I I showed you my birth certificate. It says girl on it. I'm me. You can choose to categorize me as
Uh-huh.
biological or non-biological or
Uh-huh.
certificated version of me. That's your
Uh-huh.
label. But as an identity, I'm a woman first and foremost. To my mum, I'm her daughter. No adjectives. To my wife, I'm her wife, and to my children, I'm their dad.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm proud to be a dad. I'm proud to be a daughter, and I'm proud to be a wife. So I can coexist with all three of those identities without having to put the word
Mm.
trans in any of those. And I think it's only because I do what I do that you know who I am, sort of thing. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
would not share that with anybody.
Wow. That's kind of a mic drop moment there, Joanne. Thank you so much for that. I'm gonna go away and noodle on both of your answers to that question. Even for me, and I feel like this is my line, even for me, I'm sitting here a bit like, well, yes, but I'm gonna have to go away and noodle on that. That was amazing. Thank you so
It's
much.
a, it's a good. I was just gonna say it's a really good thing. My daughters call me dad, and one of my daughters calls me father, which I'm totally fine with. But my mum and dad give me cards that say daughter. So this is all part of our complex identity, and like which I'm proud of as well. It's I am a proud dad as well as being a trans woman. So people can take that on surface value, but this is in my life, and this is how I'm authentic and to my family and to who I am to myself. So I think it's really great. Great point, Joanne.
And one of the things I realized very early in my transition, you have to sometimes meet people where they're at. And if you're
Mm,
not careful, you create all these rules in your
mm,
interactions and you put people at edge, the psychological safety, all those kind of things you can talk about. But we create artificial barriers between who I am and who they are, how they want to see me. And I realized very early on that in order to be loved, you have to be lovable. In order to be liked, you have to be likable. In order to be respected, you have to be worthy of respect. And that starts with me. I have the power to be likable and to be liked because I
mhm.
can take responsibility for how I show up. So I've been very careful throughout my transition and the way I interact with my family, close friends, and other people is to be the best version of me I can to create that environment where people can like, love, and respect me. And that's part of my in on that relationship as well.
It's brilliant. So we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to ask one last mic drop question to both of you. If someone wanted to step up as an ally right now today, what would you advise them to do? So someone's like, I want to be an ally for the trans community. What's your advice? Where are they going? How should they get started?
Gosh, Joanne, you first.
Well, let me go some ideas, and I'm going to quote Bobby Pickard, who stood up at the LGBT Awards on Friday night. I said, I'll paraphrase, do something. Being an ally is not a badge, it's not a lanyard, it's not a title, it's not something you hold. It's how you step up and show some active action right now. And getting my pronouns right. Yeah, great. You're an ally. Fantastic. What, is that going to change the world? No, it's not. It's about getting out there, recognizing the pain, the lack of hope, how the trans non-binary community feel, how my wife feels about this as well. It's not just me. My wife is impacted. My mum's impacted. How the impact is going on at the moment, and how could you turn that into action? And that's support. Lobby your MP, lobby the EHRC, lobby your employer, lobby people around you. So actually do something about it to create change and create movement. The time for pronouns, the time for getting my dead name and all these trans 101 stuff, we've been there. We don't need trans 101 anymore. We need trans action. We need you to be part of this journey with us. And I talk about holding the rope with us, because somebody's tugging that rope out of our hands. And if we don't have your help, we're going to get burns on our hands if the rope gets pulled through it. You have to be there with us, part of that weight. And that's what I say to you as an ally. Actually do something.
Do something. I love that. Oh, that's brilliant. Christina, anything to add?
I think they're just in the workplace, yes, of course, do agree totally with what Bobby was saying at the awards and what Joan's just said. Do something. And it's like, if you know a trans person in your company, ask them, are they okay? What support can they give to you? Join, be part of an active network. If you're a senior leader, step up, ensure teams are educated, challenge HR about policies around LGBT and trans inclusion. There's so many things you can do, but as Joanne says, just do something, because at the moment the trans community feels so threatened and frightened at the moment. And also, I think, cisgender people as well are frightened of what all this means as well. And there's so much confusion. And it's, just educate yourself and, get out there and stand tall, put your head above the parapet and be a voice for the trans community.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you so much to you, Christina, and you, Joanne, for sharing all of your amazing insights today. It's thanks from me, but it's also thanks from the people who are listening as well. I just want to read you a couple of comments to close. I can't tell you how amazing this webinar has been. I am an ally of the community, but I'm always conscious that I need to learn more. This has been the perfect place for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. 4 thank yous. Thank you to Joanne and Christina for sharing your experiences and creating an open, educational, and inclusive platform to have these important discussions. So another wonderful thank you here. Then there's a comment that says, I need the meeting recording. My partner has not fully come out as trans. I would love to show them. There are so many incredible experiences you have shared, which I feel would be so powerful to hear. And the thank yous keep rolling in. So everyone has appreciated your time today and your honesty in sharing. Thank you so much to the both of you for joining us today. And thank you everyone for listening, and have a wonderful rest of your day.